was 12 the night my father tried to kill us all. It was the single worst and most influential night of my life. I'm 24 now, and I still live with the effects of this one night today. When someone who's supposed to protect you and care for you turns into the one you should be afraid of, it's pretty traumatic. You never fully get over that, and you never truly trust anyone ever again. I am the oldest of 3 kids. I have a younger sister who was 8 at the time of the incident, and my brother is the youngest. He was 6. For years, we lived in a relatively rural area. We weren't too far from a bigger city, but we couldn't see our nearest neighbours from our house. We had plenty of space to play. These were the happy times. My dad worked from home for one of the countless companies that started up during the big dot-com boom in the 90s and made a good bit of money. That all ended with the crash in the early 2000s. My father lost his job and we were forced to sell our house and move to a less expensive place in the city while he looked for work. The house must have been glorious in its day. It was 3 stories and very spacious. It even had 2 staircases going upstairs, a main one in the front and a smaller one in the kitchen. Sadly, the house hadn't been kept up and was not in great shape anymore. It was almost not in the best neighbourhood. It wasn't exactly a ghetto, but it was definitely run down. That's how we managed to get it for a price we could afford. I remember being excited at the time, because even as a little girl, I was always interested in ghosts and monsters, and it seemed like we were moving into a haunted house. I wish this story were a ghost story about the house, but sadly, as they say, the living are more terrifying. During this time, my dad changed from the loving father he had always been to someone completely different. Someone we were all very much afraid of. He struggled to find any stable work and began drinking and get very violent and abusive. Most of the time it was over money. He could drink away every last cent. But how dare my mother buy food or an occasional toy for us? His rage was usually directed at my mum, but if any of us kids dared draw his attention during one of his rampages, he was always more than willing to turn on us and share the love. As the oldest, I was very protective of my younger siblings, so I would usually run them up and quietly head across the street to a small park whenever my dad was starting. That way, we were safer. If we didn't make him angry, he would leave us alone. Usually, we would head back around dark and he would be in bed, passed out by then. One night, however, he was in a particularly foul mood. The yelling was worse than ever. I even heard him from the playground across the street a few times. When darkness rolled around several hours later and we headed home, I could still hear him yelling at my mum from inside. Then I heard my mum scream in pain and fear and the sound of breaking glass. I knew something was wrong. I knew something was worse than usual. I told my brother and sister to go to the neighbours and get help, but my sister was terrified, in a panic, and wouldn't leave my side. So my 6-year-old brother ran next door alone while we cautiously approached the house. When we got inside, my mum was lying in the middle of the living room floor, bleeding. The furniture in the room was overturned, and the glass coffee table was shattered all over the floor. When she saw us, a look of terror came into her eyes, and she gasped, "Run!" But it was too late. My dad had heard us coming in and hidden behind the front door, which he slammed shut and stepped in front of. In his hand was a large kitchen knife, which was covered in my mother's blood. His eyes were filled with rage. We did the only thing we could and ran into the kitchen for the back door, but he was fast enough to cut us off before we could get inside. He flipped over the kitchen table in front of the door and screamed, "Where do you think you're going?" We scrambled into the back staircase and I slammed the door, separating it from the kitchen, and locked it. We were far from safe. There was nowhere for us to go but upstairs. My father beat on the door for several seconds and then stormed off towards the main staircase. I quietly opened the door and pulled my sister towards the basement instead of going up. Downstairs, we had a playroom and a small living room. I slid the love seat out from the wall, enough for my sister to get behind, and lay down, and then pushed it back as close to the wall as I could without crushing her. I did the same thing for myself with the couch. We lay there in terror for what seemed like hours. I could hear my father almost shaking the house in his rage upstairs looking for us. It sounded like he was flipping furniture and breaking down doors. Eventually, he figured out we weren't up there and did the same thing on the level above us. Finally, I heard him coming down the basement, and I cried silently in terror. Just as I could see his footstep on the final stair, there was a crash upstairs and lots of footsteps rushing into the house. My dad retreated into the dark corner of the basement until eventually the police worked their way downstairs and arrested him. Even after they took him away, I was still too scared to move. They eventually found us and took us upstairs, where my mother was being treated by EMTs and loaded into an ambulance. She survived, although I believe he would have killed her if we hadn't come home at that moment. We've never seen my father since that night. He wrote from prison a few times, but my mum never let us read the letters. She did tell us he said he was sorry, but that's all she would say. We never went to visit him and moved across the country shortly after. He is still locked up as far as I know. As you can imagine, the entire family spent years in counselling after that night. My younger sister has attempted suicide twice, and I still have nightmares and trust issues to this day. I don't think any of us will ever completely get over it. Hey guys, if you enjoyed this video, give it a thumbs up and share it with your friends. You can also leave a comment below. All feedback, good or otherwise, is always appreciated. If you have any creepy stories of your own, or have any topics that you would like me to cover, feel free to send them in via any of my social media. You can find all links to my social media in the description below. Until next time guys, make sure you lock your doors, stay safe, and I'll see you next video.